Blake Lively's legal team just crossed a line that should terrify every content creator on this platform. What we are witnessing is not just celebrity damage control, it is a systematic abuse of the court system designed to silence independent voices. Today, we are diving deep into how one of Hollywood's biggest stars is weaponizing subpoenas to hunt down YouTubers, TikTokers, and online commentators who dare to discuss her public legal battle. This is not just entertainment gossip anymore. This is about your First Amendment rights, about whether celebrities can use their wealth and legal teams to intimidate ordinary people into silence. And the tactics being used here? They are straight out of the abuser's playbook.
So, conversation around Blake Lively really right now is centered around the subpoenas for the content creators. I'm going to share what a lawyer is saying, several lawyers actually, about the targeting of content creators sort of as punishment and as a way for Blake Lively to sort of fish for whatever knowledge might be out there. Maybe it's delusion where she thinks all these content creators are all on the payroll of JustinBaldoni. No one really knows for sure. But this is the fascinating stuff that I tend to gravitate to with my content.
Let's establish the foundation of this story. Blake Lively is currently embroiled in a high-profile lawsuit with her It Ends With Us co-star JustinBaldoni. The details of that dispute are complex, involving allegations of harassment and competing narratives about what happened behind the scenes. But here's where things get sinister. Instead of focusing solely on her dispute with Baldoni, Lively's legal team has turned their crosshairs on independent content creators. We're talking about YouTubers, TikTokers, and podcast hosts who have done nothing more than exercise their constitutional right to comment on a public legal proceeding. These aren't traditional media outlets with corporate backing. These are individuals, often working from their homes, providing commentary and analysis. The weapon of choice? Third-party subpoenas. These legal documents demand that platforms like YouTube and TikTok hand over personal information about content creators, their real names, addresses, phone numbers, financial information, even IP addresses. It's a digital strip search, and it's being conducted without the creators even knowing it's happening. Here's what makes this particularly egregious. There's no legitimate legal basis for these phishing expeditions. Legal experts are pointing out that Lively's team is essentially throwing subpoenas around like confetti, hoping something sticks. They're claiming these content creators are part of some grand conspiracy orchestrated by Baldoni's PR team, but where's the evidence? The subpoenas themselves reveal the weakness of their case. When you're demanding someone's identity, it means you don't even know who they are, so how can you claim they're part of a coordinated attack? It's circular logic that would be laughable if it weren't so dangerous. What's particularly troubling is the scope of information being demanded. We're not just talking about basic contact information. These subpoenas are requesting financial records, payment histories, and detailed personal data. The message is clear. If you dare to criticize Blake Lively online, we will invade every aspect of your privacy.
My content. And look, we'll talk politics after this, but it's kind of the same deal. If Trump wants to sue news organizations, it's the same as Blake Lively trying to subpoena content creators. It's trying to put pressure on people to stop talking. And that pressure is really getting in the way of their First Amendment rights. The right to have an opinion, the right to report the news, the right to talk about these things online. And Blake, she can wonder all she wants if there's some conspiracy. But if she doesn't have any basis for those claims, then she's just blowing smoke up our asses. So someone posted this. This is why it's unlikely Ezra Hudson, who's Blake Lively's attorney's letter, was probably misleading and they don't have real evidence from TAG like they are trying to make people believe. So Blake Lively's attorney tried to make people believe that TAG, the other PR company that was sort of, they were accused of being part of the smear campaign. They were trying to make it believe that TAG had this list of content creators that they may have worked with, which is completely not true. If they truly had evidence from interrogatories, like emails or admissions from the PR firm, the subpoena would reference that to justify unmasking creators. The subpoena was asking for identities, which shows they viewed them as anonymous. They have nothing substantial, or else a subpoena would have met their requirements.
This strategy has a name in legal circles, the chilling effect. It's a deliberate attempt to make the cost of free speech so high that people simply stop speaking. And it's working. Content creators are already second-guessing whether they should cover this story, whether they should express opinions about public figures, whether their constitutional rights are worth the potential legal harassment. Think about the power dynamic here. Blake Lively has millions of dollars and a team of high-powered attorneys. The average YouTuber or TikToker, they're operating on shoestring budgets, often as side projects or passion endeavors. Even if they ultimately win any legal challenge, the process of fighting these subpoenas can be financially devastating. This is litigation as warfare, and the casualties are independent voices who can't afford to fight back. It's a form of censorship that doesn't require government action, just deep pockets and willingness to abuse the legal system.
And listen, this is really what it comes down to is they know publicly who's talking. They have Andy Signor, Shirsty, without a crystal ball. They've named certain people, right? But they have zero evidence other than their own conspiracies that they're all being paid by people to talk. Here's what attorney Katie had to say. She offers, I got to get her on the show. She offers really fantastic opinions regarding this case. Here's what she had to say about the targeting of content creators and just kind of how ugly this is getting.
That was given in interrogatory. But they have some interesting language, in my opinion, around this, right? It says, after TAG was ordered to respond to the interrogatories, TAG supplemented its response, identifying a number of individuals who have spoken publicly about Ms. Lively. Okay, well, a bunch of people have spoken publicly about Ms. Lively in this lawsuit. Apparently, at the behest of TAG and other Wayfair defendants. That word apparently there, I feel like, you can play with things there. That strikes me.
Legal analysts are drawing disturbing parallels between these tactics and patterns of abuse. The use of legal proceedings to harass and intimidate victims is a well-documented strategy employed by abusers. They flood the courts with frivolous motions, demand excessive personal information, and use the legal system as a weapon to maintain control. One content creator who calls herself Committed to the Brit shared her own experience with an abusive ex who used similar tactics, dragging her into court repeatedly, demanding personal information, using legal proceedings to extend his ability to control and intimidate her. The parallels to what we're seeing with the Lively subpoenas are chilling. The lack of notice to the affected creators is particularly troubling. In many cases, content creators only discovered they were being subpoenaed when their personal information had already been handed over to Lively's team. This violates basic principles of due process and fair notice.
Ball sharing her subpoena. They're looking for, her Google Pay, her YouTube, her full name, email addresses, phone numbers, physical. I mean, they have nothing if they need this. Her IP addresses, bank account info. It seems pretty aggressive. And again, how does Blake Lively think this is going to make her look any better? So all of this shakedown of content creators, it's a real concern for everybody. We have an audience of thousands. And a lot of these other content creators have audiences in the thousands. What if we all went away? What if we weren't allowed to make this type of content without getting content strikes, copyright strikes, subpoenas, being taken down by larger people? I mean, you would never have any justice whatsoever if you could just shut people up. So here we have Commit to the Brit discussing how this case reminds her of abuse she faced from her own boyfriend.
What's happening to these content creators isn't isolated. We're seeing a pattern of wealthy individuals and corporations using the legal system to silence criticism. It's happening in politics, in business, in entertainment. The strategy is always the same: make the cost of free speech prohibitively expensive. This connects to broader concerns about the concentration of power in our media landscape. As traditional journalism faces budget cuts and corporate consolidation, independent creators have become increasingly important voices in our information ecosystem. They are the ones asking uncomfortable questions, providing alternative perspectives, holding powerful people accountable. When celebrities like Blake Lively can simply subpoena these voices into silence, we lose something vital in our democratic discourse. We lose the ability to have honest conversations about public figures and their actions.
Abusers will use the court system to drag people into court over and over and over again. They will use the court system to perpetuate their abuse. And I keep thinking about my stalker. I had dated a guy when I was 17, 18 who was in his 20s. And when I moved away to college, he continued stalking me. And it was by any means necessary, which is Blake Lively's legal strategy, it seems. By any means necessary, because what they didn't do was give any of the individuals, what they didn't do in issuing their subpoenas in this case so far as we've seen, is they didn't give the individuals any sort of notice that their personal and private information was going to be shared with a third party.
The legal community is starting to ask hard questions about the ethics of these tactics. When does zealous advocacy cross the line into harassment? When does protecting a client become about silencing legitimate criticism? The attorney behind these subpoenas needs to answer for the frivolous nature of these demands. Filing false or bad faith legal documents isn't just unprofessional, it can be grounds for disciplinary action. If you're claiming copyright over court filings you didn't write, if you're demanding personal information without legitimate legal basis, you're not just failing your ethical obligations, you're actively undermining the legal system. These tactics might work in the short term. Some creators will undoubtedly be scared into silence. Some will delete their videos, shut down their channels, retreat from public commentary. But in the long term, this strategy is backfiring spectacularly.
So that being, when Van Zandt, this sham Blake Lively company, sent a subpoena to Stephanie Jones, they didn't alert Jen Abel, hey, there's a subpoena, we're going to have to give this information up, which was a huge violation. So Commit to the Brit asks a lot of great questions like, is this the sort of precedent we're going to give lawyers, that they can just dole out subpoenas and that this is just the game we'll be able to play? And where is the ethical conversation behind this? And a lot of people are talking about this, right? And if there's any lawyers who want to come on the show, but this idea that you're allowed to rigorously defend your client, absolutely. But when does it cross that line? And we're beginning to see. And by the way, this abuse that she speaks of, taking people into the court system, we see Laura Owens doing it. We're seeing Blake Lively do it against these content creators, just trying to shake them down for no good reason. And, I think in today's world, this stuff works less and less because we have the transparency of the internet. It's kind of like what I'll be discussing on the second half of this episode with Epstein. The more they say, don't look at Epstein, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, the more we're like, we need to look behind that curtain, right? And
the internet doesn't respond well to censorship attempts. The more Blake Lively's team tries to silence criticism, the more attention they draw to the very issues they're trying to suppress. It's the Streisand effect in real time, and it's going to cost Lively far more than any critical YouTube video ever could. This case will likely become a precedent-setting moment for content creators' rights. The legal community is watching, free speech advocates are mobilizing, and the public is paying attention. Blake Lively might win some battles through intimidation, but she's losing the war for public opinion. The question now is whether our legal system will protect independent voices or allow them to be bullied into silence by those with deeper pockets. The answer will determine the future of free speech in the digital age.